We talk about the value of coins, for example. I feel very much obligated to do the right thing with this history, to help steward it into the right position in the future and to help protect it. Personally, I find the experience very rewarding to do this work.
This is Life's Tough, Explorers Are Tougher, and I'm your host, Richard Wiese. Scratch the surface of an explorer and you'll find an adventure and a great story. This show is about their tales. This podcast is a proud supporter of the Explorers Club and the EC50 Initiative, 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. For more information, go to explorers.org. When most people hear the word pirate, they think Hollywood or Disney, eye patches, parrots, and a lot of "arr." But pirates weren't fictional characters. They were real people living complex, often brutal, and surprisingly nuanced lives, shaped by politics, economics, rebellion, and survival. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Clifford, a newly minted Explorers Club 50 honoree and second-generation explorer. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thank you, Richard. Pleased to be here.
I'll start right at the beginning. You've heard a lot of R's in your time. Did I hit it right?
You did. Yeah, I've just been immersed in a world of pirates since I was a young kid.
So what is it about sort of the Hollywood version? Like, do you know when the sort of eye patches and the R came about? Was it sort of Errol Flynn type era?
Yeah, I think you're right. It came through, Hollywood movies and Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island. So we dive here on Cape Cod on a real shipwreck sailed by pirates. So a lot of what we do is kind of decipher what's authentic and what really isn't, true about pirates. So it's been quite an interesting ride we've had.
So for those of us, or for those people listening, might not necessarily be familiar with the Whydah, where does it sort of play into the historic significance of pirates? Tell us a little backstory on it.
So the Whydah Gally was built as a slave ship. It sailed out of London in 1716, and it was designed to travel the triangle trade and went from England to West Africa to Jamaica. And on its return leg back to England, it was captured by the pirate Sam Bellamy and his crew. It was the 50th ship that Bellamy and his crew had taken, and they converted it into their flagship. And then they continued on their voyage, and the Whydah eventually wrecked off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts in 1717.
And when was it discovered then?
My father went to look for the Whydah around 1982. We were living on Martha's Vineyard at the time, and he grew up on the Cape. So he grew up hearing the story of the Whydah from his uncle. He was a diver and involved with shipwrecks around Martha's Vineyard, and he got this wild idea to go search for the Whydah. And at that point, it was really just, a story, a folk tale of the Cape. Over a period of 2 years, they eventually started to find traces of the shipwreck. And then I think it was around 1985, they found the bell, which confirmed it was, in fact, the Whydah Gally.
When I, think about it, you mentioned that there were 55 ships that they had captured, and I'd imagine there was value to each ship. So, was there ever a case of when's enough? These guys must have been pretty loaded, at least the captain of the ship, Bellamy, right?
Yeah, they had an enormous amount of wealth, especially for sailors at that time. The Whydah is like very, very unique in pirate history in terms of shipwrecks, in the sense it was fully loaded when it went down. They had everything they had taken from these 50 some odd ships that they had captured. They had a lot of money. They had a lot of weapons. It was fully loaded, 150 men on the crew, and they were headed up to the coast of Maine to hide out, probably to build a fort. Found many, many cannon, more cannon than the Whydah was designed to carry. So we think they were likely going to go set up a fort up in the coast of Maine.
So, I'm going to start with the premise that I opened the show with the whole idea of eye patches, parrots, and R. That R was better, by the way. Uh, if there is such a good thing as a good one. But what are some of the misconceptions? Like people have Johnny Depp. I'm assuming pirates didn't wear mascara.
Yeah, pirates probably didn't wear mascara. I don't think they forced people to walk the plank. They would probably just throw someone overboard, So the pirates were, I've always liked this idea that they did dress in these outfits, these like worldly outfits with like silks and other material from far off places because they did travel. They did cross oceans, they did interact with far off cultures, and by the time your cotton clothing reached the other side of the ocean after many months at sea, it was basically rotten. And maybe they would take a ship that had silk on board and then they would make their clothes. So they were living in a very desolate world, traveling to far off coasts. Yeah, so there's a lot of misconceptions about pirates. I enjoy the Hollywood versions and the stories as well. I read my kids stories about pirates, and there's something they really capture people's imaginations.
So, what was the makeup of a ship? How did one become a pirate?
Well, the pirates seem to band together. In the case of the Whydah, it was after the War of Spanish Succession in the Caribbean. There were these sailors who no longer were operating within navies, and the privateers were active. Basically, pirates that had licenses to attack other ships of enemy nations. And in the case of the Whydah, a fleet called the 1715 fleet went down in a great hurricane. And I'm not sure exactly, maybe like 10 or 12 Spanish galleons sank. And it created a buzz of activity amongst all these former sailors. So they flocked to these shipwreck sites, including Bellamy. And these sailors were, coming from like fairly oppressed backgrounds. It wasn't great to be a merchant sailor, and it wasn't great to be in the Navy back then. Some of them were former enslaved people, and they seemed to come together and try to take control of their own destinies in that area of the world.
So, just to give some context, your dad Barry found this off of Provincetown, and for people who don't know the geography of Cape Cod, that's right at the tip of it. And so, I would imagine that this is not an isolated shipwreck in that area. That for as long as ships could come down the East Coast of the United States, it'd have to pass the Cape.
Yeah, the Cape, it's been described as a shipwreck graveyard. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of shipwrecks off the coast. The Whydah went down off the coast of Wellfleet, right kind of in the middle of the Cape. And yeah, when we work on the Whydah, we find other shipwrecks, we find debris from other shipwrecks. We also find modern debris. But it's a bit of a navigational hazard, Cape Cod. There's really no place to run if you were to get caught in a storm. We deal with that ourselves when we're operating offshore. The wind can change, the swell can come up, and you're very exposed on the outer side of Cape Cod.
So give me the idea of what it is you do out at sea. So the shipwreck is not that far off the coast, correct?
No. So the Whydah, when it went down, it was about 500 feet off the coast. And so with our pretty extreme coastal erosion rates, it's now roughly 1,500 feet offshore.
It's
So there's
close.
been
I mean,
about,
it's in sight of shore.
oh yeah, absolutely. So there's been about 1,000 feet of erosion over the past, 300 years. So what was 500 feet is now 1,500 feet. So we work, the Whydah is said to have capsized. It went down in a massive storm. There's an outer sandbar. The ship was likely battered on the outer sandbar by large waves. It capsized, turtled, which is to flip upside down, and then it would have been dragging its rigging, its anchors, its sails as the ship was rattled and beaten by the waves. And so it created a great scatter pattern of material from the shipwreck. So when Barry found the wreck with his team back in the mid 80s, they found the main debris field of the wreck, where, there's all sorts of artifacts from the ship. Many of the cannon were there, the anchors, the heavy material. And now we're currently working for like we're working quite a ways from that main debris field, following this like scatter of artifacts underwater.
Our mission is to empower the next generation of explorers. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and have them join the expedition. So when I go to the Cape, and I've visited you and your dad many times, I've stayed at your dad's house. When you go to the beaches there, you see signs about great white sharks, and I've actually seen lots of great white sharks there. So you're diving in the water. Do you ever see sharks?
We see sharks all the time. I've never seen one underwater, but you don't see much down there. Like we deal with low visibility, lots of current, cold water, algae blooms in the peak of summer, which further decreases our visibility. So even if a shark was present, we probably wouldn't see it because we're really head down on the bottom, working with the equipment we use. We use drones occasionally to monitor the sharks, and we tend to see them on the crystal flat, calm days. These great white sharks will be glued to the beaches, swimming north and south, looking for seal. We see the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy out there all the time. They have spotter planes, they have tagging boats. So we see all the research and science going on. They'll go by, we'll wave to them, and they'll be up the coast, a half mile, a mile, tagging white sharks. So when I was a kid, it wasn't like that. There were not nearly as many white sharks on the Cape. It wasn't, an epicenter of science and shark studies. And we see that the seal population, which has really grown in the past 10, 15 years, has brought in all these white sharks. So, like I said, we'll fly a drone. If my friend who's the drone operator, we actually like prefer when he's not around because we almost don't want to know, So we feel very confident that the sharks are entirely tuned into their environment. They don't want anything to do with us. We're operating these high frequency like communications underwater equipment. White sharks tend to be attracted to like low frequency, sounds like thudding and stuff. So we feel pretty confident and comfortable. But when we are in the very, very, very low visibility, and I'm talking like sometimes it's like black water diving down there, you can't help but consider the white shark.
So another thing that I want to consider. So I've been to your museum. It's a great museum. It's in Yarmouth, right?
Yeah, West Yarmouth on Cape Cod.
West Yarmouth. Fantastic place. Honestly, it's young and old. It's a really cool place. And you have piles of silver and I don't know if there's gold coins, but it seems like there's a lot of money just laying around. I know that there's, especially among archaeologists, there's sort of like an ethical covenant of it. I would think, given the largesse of the amount of silver and gold available on this, what is going through your head to say, hey, they won't miss this pile of silver or gold? Because it seems like an awful lot of money.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible piece of history, the Whydah. And like we talked about, these pirates seized vast amounts of money, and it was in the form of silver reals primarily. We have found quite a few gold coins and gold bars as well, and jewelry of sorts. But one of the beautiful things about the project is it's all been kept together. The entire collection of artifacts has been kept together and is displayed at various exhibits. The Whydah exhibit has traveled around the country. It traveled for about 12 years. Now we have this permanent exhibit here on Cape Cod. There's also one in Salem, Massachusetts. And these artifacts are very special. It gives us a glimpse into the lives of these pirates, the trade system of the Atlantic world at that time. Like I've seen these coins my whole life, and I've seen them coming out of the water since I was a young kid. It's very cool to see, but all of these artifacts are so special, right? From the silver and
I know, but
gold
one of those
to
gold bars could literally buy a house.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of value there. Yep, and
And I've seen your house. You could use a new sunroom
I could, I could, I could use
deck or
a new stove. I was just thinking about that this morning. We really strive to keep this collection together for in perpetuity for future generations to come and experience this history. We feel, a deep sense of reverence for it. So.
yeah, and I know that, and I know that from your father. I want to speak about growing up a little because your father, Barry Clifford, he was on the cover of the New York Times, the Boston Globe, especially after they found the Whydah. He was kind of a famous guy.
Yeah.
And there's one aspect, and I've always wondered this because I didn't necessarily grow up with a famous father, that a lot of guys I knew who had famous parents, there's the public version of their parents and then the private version of their parents. Do you reflect upon having a famous father? Because your mom and dad got divorced or were divorced at that point, so you weren't necessarily living with your father when he was famous.
No, I remember his fame when I was young. My dad, I was, raised on Martha's Vineyard. He was on the island until I was about 4, and then he was off searching for the shipwreck, which really swept him up into that world. I remember helicopters landing in my yard when I was a kid. I remember the first time I ever dove in my life was with John Kennedy Jr. So there were people around. There was attention. He was definitely on these newspapers, but I was so young, I didn't really understand fame. I was in, the isolated world of the vineyard. It was a great place to grow up, a great community. My dad was very like normal outside of all of that. He was, like we talk about exploration. He was like a true explorer. He's just as happy, out trekking around in the woods right now as he would be searching for some shipwreck off the coast of Madagascar.
And I know this to be true because every time I visit your dad, he has me go off into the woods searching for things, and he really it's almost I don't want to say it's Barry Clifford disease, but he can't help but snoop around and look for just stuff.
Yeah, it's I think it's a very special quality he has. He is constantly out there, on a walk, on a search, just enjoying being outdoors. So, but I do recognize that some of the things he has done were, quite great. When I was younger, I'd be like, oh yeah, we'll one up him. We'll go out and we'll find something incredible as well. But looking back, I just there were just so many experiences where I'm like, how did we pull that off? How did he pull that off? Leading these teams of people to some far off place to go on some epic quest to locate something that was lost. So I have a lot of respect for what he's done.
When I think of your dad, I think that he is a really great storyteller and Pied Piper.
Mhm.
And part of the reason famous people, the Kennedys and other people wanted to hang out with him is, man, he brought back the romance of archaeology. And archaeology, as you know, isn't always so romantic, right? It's sometimes a lot of hours and problems and
Yeah, he would bring these people together, of all that wore different hats, whether they're historians, archaeologists, filmmakers. He was definitely the ringleader, but there were all these different people with different expertise coming together to make these projects happen. The archaeology and the conservation, it's incredibly interesting, to see it and to be around the science and to learn from these people with different skills and knowledge. So it takes quite a few different people to make projects such as this happen.
And so what do you think, when you think back at your father, what's the biggest gift he gave you in terms of, not monetary, but obviously a gift of curiosity? What do you think that the biggest takeaway from your dad is?
Well, he wasn't around so much when I was younger, right? As I got older, after high school, I began to join him more on these projects. And we went to Madagascar several times in my early, and actually we went for a period of 15 years, but I was 20 at the time when we first went to Madagascar, and we made several trips over there. I was really just fortunate to join our team and to go on these expeditions and to be with him and to travel to a distant place to be a part of a search was really a gift. And when I was younger, I don't think I really realized. I did. I realized it was quite a special experience. But now looking back at it, I see it even more. So I believe he really gave me that gift. He instilled in me a curiosity and a confidence to go out into the world and blaze a trail.
And so you have two kids right now. And
Three. Yeah.
Three. Okay.
Yeah.
I missed one. Okay. And so what are you trying to, and I know they go out on the ship with you. What are their ages again? I know your daughter's in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. 16. My daughter's 16. Then I have a 10-year-old son and then also a 6-year-old daughter.
Okay. So your kids, they're coming out on this. What are you doing different than your father? Kids have it easier these days. Come on.
What am I doing differently than him? I'm with my children on the day to day. I'm very close with my kids, and I try to show up for them in all ways, every day possible. So, they're here. They join me. He still comes offshore with us, and it's quite special. So
your dad's probably nicer to your kids, his grandchildren, than he was to you at that age. No, it's true. I know this. Like my father, I can never remember my father cooking anything ever in our house. And I cook breakfast for my kids. I cook dinner for my kids. I cook more than my wife does. I go to all their games. And I remember even, my father was very supportive, but I think in that 1950s, 60s kind of dad, 70s, they were a little more distant. And it's hard to say because I feel like I'm definitely tougher than my kids are at their age. Mm-hmm. And, I was maybe a little more self-reliant. I don't know. Are we raising our kids like little veals?
Yeah. My kids are pretty tough. I think he just got swept up in the moment, right? And it was a pretty intense project that he was leading. So, yeah, I see it. I understand what you're saying. With my children, yes, maybe I am making up for something that I feel like I didn't get. But I also am glad I had the independence I did have when I was young. I grew up surfing and skiing, and I I really love to be outdoors, and I still do. That's where I found a lot of my strength throughout my childhood.
Now, do
So
you think kids, I guess it goes without saying that you observe your kids' friends, everybody's on their phone all the time. Do you think you have to have made the observation that they're maybe missing out on something, beyond the reach of their hand?
Yeah, and I feel that with myself as well. I'm like, gosh, I got to get away from this phone. So with the kids, they see it's funny. The young generation seems to have a better grip on the phone than I expected. Like I look at my 16-year-old daughter, and she uses it when she needs to, like as a tool. She doesn't seem to, surf the internet too much or whatever. So yeah, we try to keep that technology at bay as much as possible. I love to see them when they are out in the yard, being curious about the world, going to the far corner of the forest and doing their own sense of exploring. Or my daughter's very much into running. She loves to run. She was going on a run when I left the house this morning. So I feel like they have a good compass. So I'll take some responsibility in giving them that.
All right, so your dad discovered the Whydah. You're working on it, but what's the secret? What's the dream? What's the thing that you sort of fantasize that you will discover?
Well, we have a lot yet to discover on the Whydah itself. We can look at the historical records and the trials of the pirates who survived the wreck of the Whydah, who were tried in Boston. And we can look at these records, and we know there's a lot more out there from this shipwreck that remains. We know we have found most of the cannon, for example. We have uh, maybe 50 cannon or so. The Whydah was built to carry 28 cannon. We've brought up about 50. So we know we have the anchors and some of this bigger material, but we are also still looking for the hull of the Whydah, the keel of the ship, the futtocks, the ribs. The Whydah was said, according to the records, broken and scattered. So when we're working now, we're following trails of artifacts underwater. Um, and moving in directions that the scatter leads us. And we think somewhere we may find a section of the stern. According to the original archaeological reports, there was little indicative evidence of where the stern of the Whydah was. So there's much to be discovered out there, and I would say the dream is to find to continue the project, to continue the search, and to bring back more of this material, and be able to conserve and display and show people more of the history of the shipwreck.
So I talk to your dad on a fairly frequent basis. So the dream, if I had the Clifford dream, and I can
Mhm.
include you on this, is that
Yeah.
we've always talked about the idea of possibly Vikings landing on Cape Cod. You think that's a possibility?
I think anything's possible. There's no archaeological record of Vikings. Maybe there's some coins, maybe up far up north that have been found, but
Coins don't mean anything.
according to the Viking sagas, when you read the sagas, and I'm not by no means an expert in Viking history, but they made it to the land where grapevines were growing, and maybe a whale was harvested. Perhaps they did make it as far south as Cape Cod. I think anything's possible.
If you were giving advice to somebody listening to us about being an archaeologist, what's the worst and the best part? I'm going to leave the best part for last, but what's the worst part and what's the best part? Or maybe the most challenging.
Well, I mean, challenging for us, like I would say, our biggest challenges are the physical challenges of the work we do. It can take a toll on you, diving in like pretty punishing conditions, cold water, dark water. Your ears are exposed to cold water. I've had terrible ear infections from on Cape Cod and Madagascar and Haiti. So there's the environmental factors and the environmental challenges to the work. It's an incredibly large amount of like responsibility to be a steward of such an incredible piece of history. So I feel that, I was born into this position that I find myself now in. Like maybe a carpenter teaches his son to build a house. I just happen to learn how to be a diver and to dive on these wrecks. And so it's a lot of responsibility. And I think that's the most challenging aspect of it. We talk about the value of coins, for example. I feel very much obligated to do the right thing with this history, right? To help steward it into the right position in the future and to help protect it. So I think that's quite a challenge.
And the best part?
The best part is the experience for personally, I find the experience very rewarding to do this work. Like I very much enjoy the outdoors, and to be working in the outdoors, to be working in this unknown environment, to to be underwater by yourself in this ocean, in the ocean we work in. and recovering these artifacts that have been lost for hundreds of years is incredibly special. I feel very grateful to get to do what I have been able to do.
I grew up on the water as well. And I always like summer days, sort of at the end. You've sort of spent a day out on the water. You're sitting at the dock, just watching a great sunset. And there's this really perfect ambient temperature on your skin, right? You're looking at the beautiful sunset, nice ambient temperature. And, sometimes you're even eating something there. But to me, that's the 5-star experience. Like people talk about, oh, I wish I'd dined at this place or that place. To me, I can't think of a better setting.
Yeah, we're working off the national seashore of Cape Cod predominantly. It's a beautiful place, completely undeveloped. The ocean is just fantastic. The beaches are beautiful, and we're diving on this shipwreck, uncovering these bits of history. So it's quite an experience, and I definitely savor it.
Oh, that's great. Brandon, thank you so much for spending time with us. I will keep track of you. And congratulations again. Brandon was just named the Explorers Club 50, and the slogan is 50 people who are changing the world that the world needs to know about. But I already know about you, Brandon.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in person here soon.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you enjoyed our podcast. Now we have a little favor to ask. We'd really appreciate your support, so make sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. See you out on the trail.